Next, I'm going to show another way of writing data. This will be much quicker using dict writer. So just like we had a dict reader, we have a dict writer, and it allows us to write with dictionaries. And when I said it would be quicker, I just meant the video is quicker, not necessarily that this is faster than using a regular writer. But it is easier to understand what's going on, so really it's a personal preference which one you use. So dict writer is a little more complicated. We have to specify the field names and set that equal to whatever we want the headers to be. And then we call write header to actually write a line of headers. And then we call write row to write a row based off of a dictionary. So let's just look at an example here. We're opening a file. Well, we have to import dict writer first, open a file in write mode. We create a list of headers. And then when we call dict writer, we pass in the file and we set field names to be these headers. And then we call write header, and it's going to use these field names and actually write that row for us. And then every time we call write row, we pass in a dictionary like this. Let's just take a look at some code. This is the old version using writer, so I'm going to comment that out, and I'm going to import dict writer as well, like this. Okay, and then down here, we'll do our same with open. We'll just work with cats.csv, and we'll do w, which will overwrite, but that's okay for now. So let's do this, cats.csv w as file. And then the first thing we want to define are the headers that we're going to write in. So we could do, I don't know, headers equals, we had name and age. Let's go with name, breed, and age this time. So we're going to overwrite what's currently in there and just completely erase it. All right. So then we need to make our CSV writer, whatever we want to call this, equals dict writer. And then we pass in the file, comma, and then we need field names. This is important. And we set it equal to some list. You could just put this in line, but if you have a lot of them, just do a variable like that. Now we're going to call CSV writer dot write header. And it's going to take these headers we passed in under field names and write them to the file for us. And if we just do this now, that should be enough for us to see something. If we run the code, now we go look at this cats.csv. It overwrote everything because we opened the file with write mode, which overwrites everything. But you can see it wrote those headers for us. Okay, so that's, you do that once, right? What's more important is actually writing the row. So it's CSV writer dot write row, and it takes a dictionary. And we can specify, I'm going to do it all in separate lines. We specify name, and we don't have to go in order because we're using, unlike with a list where the first thing had to be name, second thing had to be age, and they all had to line up. Here, I can specify name is, and then what do I want name to be? Let's go with Garfield, and then breed, I don't know what he is, just some sort of, let's just say orange tabby. And age, I have no idea how old Garfield is. Let's go with 10. The character's way older, but let's just say he's 10. Okay, now if I run this code and we look at what we get, there we go. Name, breed, and age, Garfield, orange tabby, and 10. So this shows us that we can use a dictionary to write. All that I would say is that, yes, this is more verbose than writing a single row like this where we don't have to specify what we're writing. This can be nicer if your data, well, obviously if your data is already in a dictionary, which a lot of the time you might be working with dictionaries, this is very easy to write data. It really just comes down to personal preference. Using writer usually means less code. Using dict writer usually means being more explicit in your code, being easier to understand. Just a preference. So one more example of using dict reader and dict writer together. Let's say I want to take my fighters data and I want to convert the centimeters height to inches or feet, whatever. Let's go with inches for now. Okay, so to do that, the math is easy. We're just going to multiply. I have a little function cm to inch that takes centimeters, and this is, according to Google, what we need to multiply by. So all I want to do is read in all the data from this file, and then I'm going to write it to a new file, and we're just going to take this number and pass it in to that cm to inch function, and then write that value down, and we'll keep these all the same. All right, so the first thing we'll do, let's do it down here. It's just our with open, and the file is fighters.csv as fighter, what am I saying, as file. And then in here, we're going to use dict reader. So we'll do CSV reader equals dict reader. We don't have to use dict reader. It's just if we're going to use dict writer, it's much easier to keep them in the same format. One dictionary, and we can read it in as a dictionary, write it out as a dictionary, instead of having to convert from a list to a dictionary. But it's not impossible. Okay, and then we just need to pass in file, and can just make sure it's working. For row and CSV reader. All right, let's just do even simpler. Print the list version of CSV reader. We test it out. There we go, getting a bunch of ordered dicts. Cool. So now we have that same question, which is, do we want to just do a nested solution where we have another, we open up the file we write to inside of this with, or do we want to save this data to a variable? Since we did it nested last time, let's do it on separate with statements. So I'll save this to a variable. I'll just call this a fighters equals list CSV reader. And then down here, we'll do another with open, and ours will be called inches fighters .py. And we need that W as file. And then we'll do our CSV writer equals dict writer. And we pass in file, but we also need the headers. Okay, so it's up to us, but the thing is, right now our headers are like this, so we can just keep that, except I'd like to change this to be height in inches instead. Maybe let's just make it height instead. All right, so we need quotes around these. Maybe there's a better way of doing this. And then we need to turn it into a list or a tuple, and then we'll just do headers equals that. And then here we need to do field names equals headers. Okay, and then we'll do our CSV writer dot write header. And let's run this now. It looks good. And the file that we made, what was it called? Inches fighters. Let's look for that somewhere over here. There we go. All right, we've got the headers in there. So now all that we have left is to loop through fighters. And we're going to call CSV writer dot write row. So for fighter in fighters, let's just call it F to keep it shorter. We're going to call CSV writer dot write row. But this takes a dictionary. We'll do it on a couple lines. And we need to match these headers. I guess I didn't show this earlier, but if we, mess them up, we don't spell them correctly, we do something else, well, I'll show you what happens. So we have these ordered dicts right now, and if I actually just kept them as is and just passed in F, right row F, and we run it, you can see it gives me this problem because the field that they have right now is called height in centimeters. And what I wrote down was height because I want to get rid of that. So that gives us a slight problem. What we could do is basically loop through each one, leave this untouched, leave that untouched, and then remove this entirely and add in a new key value pair for height and set it equal to the inches version. Or we could just do this instead. Instead of trying to write the row directly, we could write name and set that equal to F of name. And this is kind of verbose to have to do this, but it works. Country, we set to F of country, so those are the same. And then here we get to height, and we set height to, and then this is to start, we could just do F. What was that header? Just copy it from here. It had the height in CMs, like that. So that's how they're stored. If we did this and we run it, and we look at our result, oh, well, I just realized I made this a Python file. It's not what we want really, why we're getting that highlighting. But the syntax is all the same of what's being written. But the main problem is that this is still centimeters. I want inches. So before I forget, let's make this .csv, okay? And down here, we're not gonna set height to this. We wanna pass this into cm to inches. cm to inches. But there's still another problem, which is this is going to be a string, and this expects it to be an int or a number, and so we get this conversion problem. So we could just this isn't necessarily the best way of doing it because this is called centimeters to inches. You would think a function named that would just take a number. It shouldn't take a string and automatically turn it to an int, but this is okay. We'll just assume whatever we get, we'll turn it into an int and then multiply it. Or actually better yet would be a float. In case somebody passed in a float, we won't lose data accuracy. Okay, let's test it. Now let's actually look at the correct file, which was inchesfighters CSV. We might want to round, but you can see that we're getting data now. We have name, country, and height. We have this new file. We transfer data from here in centimeters for height over here to inches for height. Everything else is identical. Okay, so hopefully that makes it clear how we can use dict writer along with dict reader. We're getting data in as a dictionary. Usually this would actually be a lot shorter, but the thing is that I wanted to rename height in CM to now be called height, which caused a problem. If I had left it as height in CM, it would have been a lot easier, except it would have been a lie because we're working with inches now. So because of that, we have to update this field on every dictionary before we insert it. So we can't just take fighters and loop through each fighter and just add F like I showed you at the beginning. That would work for all the other pieces of data like name and country, but it wouldn't work for height because it's not stored under height. It's stored under height in CM. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of choices when you're working with CSV. 2 different ways of reading in and 2 different ways of writing out to a file. At the end of the day, they all work. It just really depends on your personal situation, what you prefer, and if you like to be shorter but harder to, less explicit, or if you like to be a little longer, more verbose, but clear and explicit about what code does.